On a quiet Tuesday morning in August 2025, the city of Savannah, Georgia, was just beginning to stir. The sun rose over silent streets and empty parking lots, hinting at another ordinary day in the heart of America's industrial South. But for Hyundai's American operations, this morning would be anything but ordinary. As workers arrived at the sprawling automotive plant, a sense of routine was quickly shattered by the unexpected. Federal agents descended on the Savannah Hyundai plant, launching a sweeping raid. The official reason: a large-scale visa fraud scheme allegedly involving hundreds of foreign workers. More than 300 South Korean professionals were detained in the operation, sending shockwaves through families and corporate boardrooms back in Seoul. The news spread rapidly, leaving loved ones anxious and uncertain, and business leaders scrambling for answers. This was not just an immigration crackdown. For many, it symbolized a deeper, more troubling shift in the relationship between the United States and South Korea, two nations long bound by economic and strategic ties. South Korean companies had poured billions of dollars into the U.S. economy, building factories, creating tens of thousands of jobs, and fueling local communities. Their investments were seen as a testament to mutual trust and shared prosperity. But the raid shattered that trust overnight. Boardrooms that once buzzed with optimism now echoed with doubt and disappointment. The foundation of this economic partnership suddenly seemed fragile. Investors and analysts began to question the stability and predictability of doing business in America. Was the U.S. still a safe haven for foreign investment, or had the rules of the game changed? In South Korea, the public reaction was swift and emotional. Many saw the detentions as a national humiliation, a blow to their country's pride and global standing. Protests erupted outside the U.S. Embassy, and the story dominated headlines. The incident forced both governments and corporate leaders to urgently reevaluate the future of the U.S.-South Korea economic alliance. Tensions ran high in diplomatic meetings and boardroom negotiations. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. The raid triggered a chain reaction, threatening to disrupt global supply chains and unsettle markets around the world. In Seoul, the question shifted dramatically, from whether South Korean companies should invest in America to why they would risk it at all. The calculus of international business was being rewritten in real time. The raid was more than a legal action. It was a political earthquake. It challenged the very foundation of a long-standing alliance, casting doubt on decades of cooperation and shared goals. Now, as both nations look to the future, the fate of U.S.-South Korea economic relations hangs in the balance. Uncertain, uneasy, and forever changed by a single morning in Savannah. In the aftermath of the raid, South Korean corporate giants reconsidered their U.S. strategies. Hyundai, Samsung, and LG shifted focus from expansion to risk mitigation. America, once a safe investment haven, now seemed unpredictable. Companies began exploring alternatives in China and Southeast Asia. The raid highlighted regulatory risks and political volatility in the U.S. protectionist policies, further complicated the investment landscape. Trust, once a cornerstone of U.S. partnerships, was eroding. The raid signaled a willingness to disrupt major investors over bureaucratic disputes. South Korean chaebols concluded that U.S. political risk was too high to ignore. At first, there was only silence from the business community, as boardrooms and factory floors across South Korea waited to see how events would unfold. But soon, South Korean corporate leaders began to break their silence, stepping forward to voice their growing concerns about the situation. A Hyundai executive, speaking candidly, expressed disbelief and frustration at the treatment their employees had received, highlighting the shock and uncertainty spreading through the company. Samsung's Lee Jae-yong took the stage at a press conference, emphasizing the urgent need for stability and predictability in international investments, warning that sudden disruptions could have far-reaching consequences. LG, another major player, issued a statement warning that employee safety and operational stability were now their top priorities, and that any threat to these would force them to reconsider their global strategies. The Federation of Korean Industries responded by compiling a comprehensive report, analyzing the growing risks associated with investing in the United States. Their concerns ranged from arbitrary legal enforcement and unpredictable regulatory changes to volatile immigration policies, that could disrupt business operations overnight. The report concluded that, for the first time in years, the risks of investing in the U.S. might actually outweigh the potential rewards. A sobering assessment for many. As these findings made headlines, public statements from Korean industry leaders sent a clear and unified message to Washington. Urgent action was needed to restore trust. The recent police raid on a corporate office only intensified these fears, forcing many companies to reevaluate whether the U.S. could still be considered a reliable investment partner. The collective voice of Korean industry, now louder than ever, highlighted the pressing need for change and greater transparency in international business dealings. This incident underscored just how fragile international business relationships can be, and how quickly trust can be eroded by unexpected events. If the United States hopes to remain a top destination for global investment, it must address these concerns head-on and take concrete steps to restore confidence among international investors. As South Korean companies reconsidered the U.S., China extended a warm welcome. Chinese provinces offered incentives contrasting with perceived U.S. hostility. Tax breaks, subsidized land, and streamlined approvals were on the table. China's long-term stability appealed to companies seeking predictability. Locating in China offered access to massive domestic and Southeast Asian markets. The idea of an Asia-centric supply chain gained traction. Korean executives in China enjoyed support and stability, unlike their U.S. counterparts. The choice between American uncertainty and Chinese guarantees became clearer. The potential withdrawal of South Korean investment threatened U.S. states. Georgia, Alabama, and Texas relied heavily on these foreign investments. The Hyundai Meta plant in Georgia faced an uncertain future. Economic fallout loomed if Hyundai scaled back or halted construction. Governors scrambled to mitigate the damage and reassure investors. The U.S. government promised reviews and reassurances, but skepticism remained. The raid highlighted contradictions within U.S. economic and political strategies. Local officials and workers hoped for a resolution to save promised jobs. The situation underscored the need for coherent and consistent U.S. policies. The credibility of the U.S. as a reliable investment destination was at stake. In South Korea, the raid sparked widespread anger and deeply wounded national pride, igniting a fervor that swept across the nation. The image of detained engineers, broadcasted repeatedly on national television, fueled public outrage and became a symbol of perceived injustice. Major newspapers and news programs across the country criticized the U.S. actions, highlighting the tension and calling for a strong response from the government. Labor unions swiftly organized protests, demanding a halt to U.S. investments and calling for solidarity among workers to protect national interests. The South Korean government faced mounting pressure to respond forcefully, with officials deliberating on the best course of action to address the public's concerns. Diplomatic protests were lodged, but public demands for decisive action persisted, as citizens called for more than just words. The incident quickly became a matter of national sentiment and corporate calculus, with businesses weighing the risks of continued U.S. partnerships. Continuing U.S. investments risked domestic backlash and boycotts, as public sentiment turned increasingly hostile towards American interests. Unions framed the issue as one of worker dignity and corporate responsibility, emphasizing the need for fair treatment and respect. The powerful combination of public anger and union pressure was undeniable, creating a formidable force that demanded attention. The chaebols, South Korea's powerful conglomerates, were pushed to reconsider their American commitments, balancing economic interests with national sentiment. The raid reshaped the narrative of U.S.-South Korea relations, marking a turning point that could redefine future interactions between the two nations. The Hyundai raid caught the attention of global industrial powers. Japanese and German companies watched with concern. The idea of their personnel facing similar raids was unsettling. Japanese automakers reconsidered U.S. expansions amid new risks. German industries noted the heightened regulatory and political volatility. The ripple effect threatened to divert investments from the U.S.-America's reputation as a safe investment haven was tarnished. The raid provided rivals like China with a compelling argument. The global competition for investment intensified. the U.S. faced the challenge of restoring its image as a stable partner. The Georgia raid may mark a pivotal moment in global economic realignment. America's economic leadership, once a constant, faced challenges. The incident exposed weaknesses in U.S. investment strategies. China seized the opportunity to promote its vision of economic integration. Initiatives like RCEP aim to bind Asian economies closer to China. The shift threatened U.S.-Asia alliances and economic ties. A more China-dependent South Korea could alter geopolitical dynamics. The raid undermined decades of American diplomacy. The story was about trust, stability, and global leadership. America's reputation as a predictable and fair power was at risk. Rebuilding trust required more than policy fixes. It demanded a fundamental shift.